From trichomes.com, I'm Jason Kitamura, and this is Tech and Cannabis. I talk with game changers in the tech community to gain valuable insights into the future of the fast-paced cannabis industry. Today, we are joined by Dede Perkins of ProCanna, a cannabis compliance management software. We talk about how she transitioned from a writer to a SaaS founder and how her experience helping businesses apply for cannabis licenses showed her the need for this product. We also talk about how much time you can save by using a compliance software, the dangers of falling out of compliance, and how regulation is shaping the entire industry. All right, and today we have Dede Perkins with ProCanna. Hi, Dede. Thanks for coming on to the show.
Hey, Jason. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, so I guess for the audience members that don't know what ProCanna is, why don't you give us a little info about your company?
Sure, happy to. ProCanna is a hub that basically starts with the regulations and has SOPs and policies, training, audits. It sort of keeps everybody on the same page and for compliance and operation purposes.
Gotcha. So it's a SaaS platform, correct?
Yes.
All right, and it's focused mostly on compliance and procedure and just workflow efficiency, right?
Definitely, yeah. Both compliance towards external state regulations and rules and statutes, as well as companies' internal policies and procedures. Everything can be put in the same platform.
Gotcha. Now, so I mean, I like to always ask kind of the founders of these companies because some people have a background in cannabis that extends a long time, and some people kind of just got into it. How did you get into the business? How did you get into this vertical of cannabis?
Yeah, I was a writer. It was 2013, and one of my clients said this guy she knew needed help with an application, but she didn't know any more than that. So I went in and met with him, and nice guy. He throws up his hands and says, I don't know if you know anything about medical marijuana. I knew nothing at the time. And, I'm not a stoner, but I really need help with this application. And I ended up joining that team. It was for one of the first competitive licenses in Massachusetts. We won that license. And in that process, I was introduced to the world of medical cannabis, and I met people at the national level and really felt pretty compelled by it all and started getting work, other referrals. And within like 18 months, my writing practice had sort of pivoted largely into the cannabis space. Small and big companies, applications, case studies, just marketing copy, whatever. Primarily applications and regulatory work, though, because there was a lot of that at the time.
Interesting. I mean, from experience and kind of observing some people I know that do an application, it's a pretty intensive process when it comes to cannabis.
It certainly is. It's, in fact, I went in-house with my largest client in 2015 to be part of the application team, there was just two of us at the time. And I was employee number 50, and they had one facility and another one was opening. By the time I left 5 years later, we were operating in 9 states. The company had gone public, almost 1,000 employees. So I just had this front row seat over the last 8 years of companies, big and small, sort of navigating that very challenging, often very challenging application process. And then equally challenging process of, complying with everything you've promised in the applications, the state regs for the different verticals, all your teams, and yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, compliance is probably the biggest headache in the industry for sure. But in the application, there is a lot of the compliance portion that you have to kind of put together as well, correct?
Every state is different, but yes, in most cases, they're very interested in how you're going to handle your operations and how you're going to maintain compliance.
So is that in that process, is that where you kind of saw the need for the compliance software?
Certainly, I think in the application process, there's very few states that have electronic, searchable regulations. So literally, we were working with pen and paper, and so I definitely saw a need to digitize the regulations and make them searchable. So that was the foundation. But more than difficulty in the application process, really, there was such high turnover in the industry, and SOPs were changing so quickly because it was a brand new industry, and they kept finding better ways to do things. And for one example, a company hired a new master grower, to run all the cultivation facilities in a state, and changed all the SOPs for these new, very sophisticated growing techniques. And the industry was booming, still is, but that person gets poached 8 months later. Somebody else comes in with slightly different SOPs. So it was just very hard to sort of maintain training and keep everybody on the same page, because it literally felt like every couple months things were changing. And that's just hard to manage.
No, absolutely. So, I mean, it makes sense to have a software that kind of handles that for you, where you can have everything under one roof. Um, Now, the software side, I guess, how did it go about, or like when did it become a idea that hey, we can create a subscription software that's going to handle some of these things for these companies?
It didn't really start out as an idea for a subscription software. It was more like an idea. I literally just had the same thing over and over in my head. Like there has to be a better way.
Hmm.
And I started. My husband's an attorney who had a largely technology startup practice. We had a number of friends in the software development field. I knew a
Gotcha.
lot of people in cannabis, and literally I didn't really think much of it. We just started talking about it and taking these little steps, and months later, we decided, yeah, anyways, it was just a slow sort of organic process. We vetted software development companies basically in 2019, the end of 2019, built the first version of the product in 2020, and then launched this last January. So it's very new.
Gotcha, gotcha. And yeah, just being in the industry, I know how tedious that process could be. Just even selecting the right team to kind of handle what you're looking to do is not the easiest. Um,
It is not. And we almost contracted with a company first that had great recommendations, but something felt wrong, and we ended up not signing the contract. And they pulled all their U.S. operations to Poland, and but hadn't told us that. Literally, we had the contract that I'm like, I can't sign it. There's something they're not telling us.
right.
Literally a month later, we got a notice that they were moving, and we started the process all over again. But it was worth it because the team that we ended up hiring, they're like family now. They are awesome. So they're really terrific.
That's great. Yeah, I mean,
So it worked out.
just in the industry, it's the technology labor costs are so different from the U.S. to other countries that it's companies love to do that, but and switch over, but when that gets to the nitty gritty, when you have something technical, it's very tough to get the translation over and the turnarounds, and yeah, it's a headache for sure.
And
Um,
I mean, I understood it, but like even just the time difference, just try, I
exactly.
don't mind if there's a team in another place, I guess, but you want the person who's sort of your connection to that team to be close by, I guess, or at least in the same time zone or close to the same time zone.
Absolutely. So now, just a question, because so I guess to clarify your platform, I mean it kind of covers like all levels of regulation. So it's not only as far as like the owner operator to kind of see like the paperwork and how the flows are supposed to go, but you also are doing training for the actual employees and SOPs for them, correct?
Yep, it's sort of that process right from the beginning. It's state regulations for all verticals. If it's in a statute or a regulation, it's in ProCanna, and then we just wanted that whole chain. So up from the regulations, building the policies and procedures that make sense for your facility. Being able to train, attach videos. Customize quizzing to test. Knowledge base to
Wow.
then. Auditing, going out on a monthly basis or a weekly basis or whatever is important to you, and documenting in a date and time stamp format, that you can take pictures and video and upload documents that prove, number one, you are in compliance when you are for supply chain issues and investors and all kinds of reasons, but also to identify when you may not be in compliance. And one of our first customers in Massachusetts, they went in, they did an audit every week in their facilities, and he went in on one of the dispensaries. They did not expect an inspection at the time. It was sort of, at the tail end of COVID, and there still weren't a lot of inspections. And he went in and identified one issue. The facility manager was notified. It was all documented in ProCanna. Like 10 days later, or 2 weeks later, they had an unexpected visit from the
Wow.
regulator, and that person identified the exact same issue was potentially a big issue. It was a visitor log and access to cannabis, and literally they showed them ProCanna, and they didn't even get a deficiency. He said, I've never seen that, and it's cool that you're being proactive, and we appreciate that. And so he was literally one of our first customers, and he was just buoyant. So that gave us a nice little boost really early on. But so there is very significant practical
I
implications
see. So you
of
can kind of
auditing.
use the tool to audit yourself, basically, to just make sure everything is in compliance. So for the instance that you actually really do get audited or somebody's coming for an inspection, you're kind of ready to show everything.
Yeah. Another thing is, I mean, if bigger companies, I mean, if there's a regional director, for instance, and they hear something's going on, say in the packaging department, something may not be right. Literally, they can create an audit on the fly through a ProCanna, assign it to somebody. The person has a phone or a tablet in the field. They collect the information. They take photos, whatever it is. It's all date and time stamped. Literally, that regional manager has accurate real-time information, in a couple hours that then, he or she can take action on. So, there's a lot of different ways to use the platform. And that's just another example.
No, and now you're talking about quizzes and testing. So I mean, it's almost like, is there almost like kind of like an internal certification system that makes sure like the employees, are up to date on the compliance and the procedures?
Yep. And I mean, it depends on how they run it, but I mean, you could set up training modules for like lots of different departments. And if someone was interested in something else, if you wanted them to, they could sort of start learning about, if they're thinking of moving up or moving over in your organization, and if they pass it all, they can print a little certificate or, so it's just, again, everybody can do it differently. You can assign it just to individual people or sort of open up your information and, allow certain classifications of employees to access certain, trainings. And that access is important in ProCanna. So when we started to build it, it became obvious early on that we needed to have sort of gates in the system. Like you don't want a brand new employee being able to edit SOPs, or even someone who's drafting SOPs necessarily to be able to publish them or to report out. So there's all kinds of role authorizations, if you will, built into the system that people get assigned, what they can and can't do. So to keep people where they're supposed to be.
Gotcha. Now, who would you say is your most focused on target vertical in the space? Is it more the growers, the distribution? At which point? I know they could probably use it for all, but which point, I guess, would you say is kind of the most receptive to the product?
I would say cultivation and manufacturing primarily, although we have a number of dispensary owners on the platform too, just because there's some of the SOPs are a little more sophisticated or a little more involved. But, it's all about brand. So, I mean, even in retail, if you want your employees to do things a certain way, or you want, I think it's very helpful if the owners in the store, they probably don't need ProCanna. But, as soon as your team gets bigger and you just want a way to keep everybody on the same platform and manage those people, that's when ProCanna becomes, an option, I would say, or important.
Okay. How many states do you have covered in the software?
We are in 5 states now,
Okay.
Mass, Maine, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan. We're building the content on Illinois right now, but ready to publish that in another couple weeks. And we're always working ahead. Arizona's coming up, and
Right.
so as our team grows, we'll build the content faster, but we're still pretty new. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess tell me about that process. I mean, how much is of it is a headache? Because I know that the compliance does kind of fluctuate and change and things like that. How's that process been so far?
You mean the startup process?
Well, the process of engaging, I guess, the content for the compliance, like knowing that sometimes the compliance and the regulations change and they fluctuate between the states, and I mean, it's like, how's that process been?
So, I mean, that's another reason why ProCanna is important, is that, I mean, you can be a multi-state operator, and the way you package in, Michigan may be different from the way you're going to package in Arizona. So those slight differences, you can deal with them in ProCanna. But from a content point of view, every state's different. Some states are pretty light on regs. We put everything in, from the statute to the regulations. We also we see ourselves as sitting between our customers and the regulatory agencies or the legislature. So if there's legislature coming down the pike, that may change the way they handle pesticides, we'll send key updates to our users in that state that says, hey, just keep an eye on this, but that's our job, is to make sure everything's up to date. And some states are more challenging than others, honestly. But we have team members who, that's what they do. They pay attention, with lawyers contracted in different states. And, we just make sure we've got a handle on what's going on in the state before we enter it, basically. So I have a system to keep it all up to date.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier that, kind of at the beginning, you were more envisioning kind of like a search for compliance in like your area. There wasn't a digitized version or anything out there that allowed someone to just kind of look at the area and see what the compliance laws were. That being said, is some of the the use of your system for people who are not currently in that state, like to kind of see what the regulations are before they do that? Is that kind of a way they can use the software as well?
They could certainly. Yep. We didn't really anticipate when we were first, just imagining how this was all going to work. And in a startup, that is, you're just hoping it's going to work a certain way. We sort of saw ourselves just addressing the operators. But as soon as we started, introducing ourselves in the market and having a presence on LinkedIn, we started getting contacted by attorneys and cannabis and consultants and CPAs. So people that wanted to help in the application process, people that were doing just what you said, they want to see. So that is, yes. So I would say yes, that is an interesting development in the last 6 months.
Yeah, I mean,
people are using the system for that.
Kind of full circle to what you did when you first started, like putting together the application.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm assuming that if you can see all the compliance, it makes it much easier to put that paperwork together for the application.
And we've built so every part of the regulations that need an SOP or a policy, we've built sort of that foundational, we've done that original work. So, you can literally build on top of what we've got, and, you're not going to miss anything, But that said, I always say we don't want anybody to take our word for it. All the documents are searchable, so if someone says, hey, I think they missed a security reg, literally they can just, search for all the time security shows up and, see for themselves if we missed something. And if they do, if we did, I hope they let us know, but I don't think we did. So, but.
Now this may be a tough question to answer, but I mean, I just from experience, I know like how tedious, putting together, SOPs and compliance for employees and stuff are. Do you have an estimation on how much time a company could save if they used your platform versus if they didn't have it, if they just tried to do everything manually?
A mind-boggling amount of hours.
I'm assuming.
Honestly, I guess everybody's system's different. Some teams are more efficient than others, but I do think having a system and having everything in one place, it answers a lot of questions. It speeds up the process. It just, so yeah, I'm a big believer in systems. So.
Absolutely.
But I don't know how many hours. Yeah, I don't have a number. Although it'd be interesting if I did.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's so many different penalties and different things for different breach of compliance. I mean, in your experience, I mean, what's kind of the worst thing that you've heard if somebody falling out of compliance and what happened to their business?
Well, I know there's been very hefty fines for, incorrect or inappropriate use of pesticides. I know there's been some licenses pulled for inventory violations. It's a big deal when there's that kind of mistakes. So, we certainly care about the violations, and that's a good reason to just be compliant. But I think it's more than that. It's also just developing your brand and, making sure that your company, your employees are doing what you want to do to support their brand. So those internal policies and procedures to me are equally important. I mean, I don't want you to just use it because you're afraid of fines. I mean, there's so much potential to build out, really ways to just make your brand really trusted and loyal, and your products really standardized, and your interactions with the public consistent. And so it's but both are real.
Absolutely. And not only that, it seems like on an efficiency standpoint, as far as like task management and workflow, it seems like with the software, you can streamline everything a lot easier.
You can, yeah. I mean, all assignments can go right in the system. It's a pretty, and it's our goal when we were building it was, just to be really user friendly and clean and simple. And from the feedback we've gotten to the market, that I think we've accomplished that, and that there's not a long onboarding process. In fact, there's virtually none. It's very intuitive. So, we can do a demo or two and walk you through it. We're always here to answer questions, but most companies that jump on don't need much help. So that was very interesting. I mean, that was our goal, and we do have all FAQs with videos and stuff, but it's pretty easy.
Yeah, it seems like it's kind of a no-brainer for startups, because I know that, just because of the industry and the growth, everybody's kind of interested to find a way to get into the business, but the compliance is what scares a lot of people. Either they're just ignorant of the compliance and then they're just risking their business the entire time, or they understand it and they're like kind of freaked out and kind of step back and never pull the trigger. So I think this is a great tool for somebody. Would you say it's good for like a startup to kind of at least start understanding what has to happen?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like you said, I mean, there are some operators that they're never going to be compliance driven.
Right.
Maybe they like to just run it. Those are not our customers. I mean, I fully understand that it's not for everybody, but I do think for as the industry gets more mature and operators get more sophisticated, I mean, the public is going to require, this is food. This is stuff people are
Yeah.
ingesting and putting in their bodies or putting on their bodies. I mean, it's there'll always be people who try to do it their own way or take shortcuts. But I think ultimately the market's going to reward those who, try to do it right and just become trusted brands, and even their their work culture. I feel like if you know what's expected of you and the rules are clear, that's a better way to work than if you're always sort of feeling like you're behind the eight ball or worrying that someone's going to find out something.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it just seems like as the industry gets more mature and larger, once legalization gets a little bigger, or if it gets federally legalized, and the larger players are going to start stepping in, like everything's going to be more like locked in as far as the compliance side and more strict. I mean, is there any plans for trying to kind of standardize, your software, or at least have some sort of exportable report that's going to go directly to, auditors and people who are doing the inspection, so they can? Is that kind of the plan to kind of get in that side of it?
We've discussed that. I mean, honestly, at this point, we do not have that. We're not sort of going down that road. But I mean, I think it's an obvious. Potentially, right. A good connection. Some people will like that, some people won't. But yeah, I think it's a really great way to report out to anybody, even if it's your insurance agent or your banker or
right.
an investor. I mean, so the reporting is pretty robust, and so potentially that's a connection.
Okay. What's in the future for your company? What's kind of the next phase or the next step?
We're just going to keep doing what we're doing, listening to the market. I mean, ProCanna is never going to be done. We're always just going to keep building distinct content and listening to what our users want, and just trying to serve the market. I mean, we're all in this together, and so it's just keep doing what we're doing, I think.
All right. So for our listeners out there that are looking to get into the business but are kind of afraid of the compliance side, or the owner operators that want to streamline things, what's the easiest way that they can get started or learn more about ProCanna?
I think it's our website. It's just procanna-usa.com. You can also reach me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty responsive. So if someone wanted to get in touch with me, I invite them to ping me on LinkedIn. But those are probably the two easiest ways.
Okay. Perfect. And before I let you go, I always want to ask, because you're deep in the trenches, you're seeing all the regulation changes. What do you see in the forefront of the future of the cannabis industry? What do you suspect is going to be happening?
I mean, I think the chatter at the federal level, who knows how long it's going to take, but I do think there's some big changes coming down the pike. And I think, more, it's coming. More and more states are going to be legalizing cannabis. Hopefully, we'll start righting some of the social wrongs that have been committed. And, I just feel like we're at a sort of a tipping point here. We're not quite there yet, but I definitely see federal legalization. And, and then once that happens, interstate, you can cross borders, that changes everything. And I think that set of regulations will sit on top of the state regulations, and then it'll be really interesting. So.
Well, you'll be well positioned at that point. So. Again, thanks for coming on to the show. It was great learning more about your product, and we'll be in touch.
Sounds great. Thanks very much, Jason. Have a good one.
All right.
Bye.
Once again, I want to thank Dede Perkins with ProCanna for coming on to the show, and for all your cannabis news and for other podcasts like this one, come visit us at www.trichomes.com. If you want to reach out to the show, email us at techandcannabis@trichomes.com. I'm Jason Kitamura, and thanks for joining us.